Hello everyone, my name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about That Room written by Tobias Wolff. Now, before I go into summary analysis of this work, please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment so that the channel can continue to grow. So, in the short story That Room, we get introduced to a narrator who is a teenager. It's during his summers in high school. He gets jobs here and there, doing some work on certain farms. Now, in this short story, the narrator finds this farm that he likes. The farmer, gives him a good enough pay, or they agree on a payment that the narrator is very happy with. And the farmer's wife also feeds him. So he's a teenager. It's his first go around with money. This is the first time in his life where he has some type of freedom. He's getting the liberty to get away from his friends, get away from his parents, not have to be examined and judged by his friends and his peers and his parents. And so the narrator, wants to change his life. The narrator wants to have complete control in his life, and that's the story for most teenagers. After a while of living in your parents, kind of like your parents deciding everything that you do. Once you're like around your 15 or your late teens, you want to be the boss of your own life and take charge of your own life. And this narrator is trying to do that by getting a job and getting some money, and this gives him a level of freedom because for the first time he gets to do what he wants because he has the power of the purse. He can pull his own purse strings. And so the story goes on, and he's working for this farmer, and ultimately, he gets to be a farmhand. Now, this for him is quite significant, but for most people who work on farms, if being a farmhand is nothing special. So the narrator seems very like he's not in his regular place. Being a farmhand is not something that you celebrate. It's something that just is. If you work on a farm, you're a farmhand. You're not gonna thank the academy. But it's almost like he's thanking the academy. He's like, I made it. I finally made it. This is such an honor to be a farmhand. There's nothing special about being a farmhand. It's just a normal job. And the narrator is working with Clemson, the farmer's nephew, and these two Mexican individuals, these two Mexican men. Miguel and Eduardo, they're brothers. Miguel doesn't speak that much English, so he doesn't talk a lot in the short story. Eduardo does all of the talking, and he's kind of like telling Clemson and the narrator how much of a ladies' man he is, how adventurous his life is, and he's like always telling a story. He always has a story to tell. He always has something to say. He's the fun guy. He's the leader of the group in some ways. And the narrator and Clemson, they're younger, and so they'll hear anything that this adult has to say about the free world, and since the narrator wants to change his life so much, since he wants to have control of his life so much, he's hearing Eduardo tell all these wonderful wild stories. He wants to have that type of free life of doing whatever you want. But the thing is, like, the reality that Eduardo is talking about, I personally don't even think that Eduardo is living that type of life, because the job that he has, it's not a glamorous job. It's a backbreaking, gruesome job that takes a lot out of you. And he's pretty much living in poverty. And for farmhands in several places on Earth, and when you're a farmhand, you're not getting paid massive dollars to gather hay, or to gather food and fruits and things on a farm. You're not paid a lot to do that. And so the story goes on. The men work hard. The narrator's pretty inexperienced. He's coming of age. He's learning stuff about the world, and pretty much he learns a lot about the world very quickly, because what happens next is that Eduardo, Miguel, they invite the narrator and Clemson to their motel room. This is where they're staying, and the Mexican brothers, they're seasonal workers, and so they're just trying to make some money. They're just trying to survive. And in this hotel room, the narrator tells us that it smells like mildew. The room is horrible. The stench is horrible. Even though it looks like the men try their best to keep it in shape, it's still a horrible looking place. It's a horrible place to live. And to me, when I'm reading this, the short story doesn't go into the Mexican brothers being undocumented people. It doesn't really talk about that, but sometimes I kind of get a sense that maybe there's a potential that the Mexican brothers could be undocumented, because there's a place where the narrator says, "I'm gonna work as if I had no choice," and I mean, the short story doesn't completely say, or it doesn't really go into the Mexican brothers being um, undocumented, but I mean, you could make somewhat of a case of them being undocumented, because they're working a job that most Americans won't do. They're living in very poor conditions. They're seasonal workers, and there is a little bit of talking about the border. So there's some little clues around the short story to make us think that the Mexican brothers could be undocumented. That could be something that they've had to deal with at some point in their lives. They're not, working a glamorous job, and it's almost like the brothers. This is their life. This is their job. They are working, and I don't think they have a choice on deciding where they can work. And there's several clues throughout the short story to kind of maybe make you think, or at least consider that the Mexican brothers could be undocumented. So to them, life to the Mexican brothers, life is not peachy. And so the Mexican brothers, of course, they invite them, and the narrator and Clemson, they come into this motel room. Everybody's drinking, everybody's having a good time. Eduardo's telling them about his stories and all these wonderful things that he's done in his life. And then he gets called out by somebody. He goes out of the room, and Miguel and Clemson and the narrator, they're left in the room they're left in the room. Miguel is drinking and drinking, and keep in mind that he's not a talker. He doesn't talk too much, but as soon as you have enough beers in him, he starts talking. And that's a reality that exists with a lot of people. When people drink, sometimes their true colors come out. When you drink, you get loose, and maybe everything you've been holding in, it comes out. And so Miguel, at first, he's just drinking, having a good time with the guys, and then he just bursts into a rage, and he's screaming, and he's speaking in Spanish. He's screaming. He breaks into broken English, and then out of nowhere he gets a gun. He's waving it, and he brings out the gun. He lays it on the table, and it's an older gun. And the narrator's terrified. I mean, how does life get turned so bad so fast? And you're, as the reader, you're kind of shocked, because you're reading this little short story. It's talking about a farm, and this kid, this narrator coming of age, and then bam, you get this adult who has a gun, who's screaming in Spanish. And the narrator, he tells us that he's not sure of what Miguel is angry about. Is he angry at the boss? Is he angry at some other boss? Is he angry at something else? Is he just drunk? I mean, there could be several things going through his mind. And Clemson kind of saves the day, because he throws up, and this vomit kind of kicks Miguel out of his rage and anger and into disgust, because he's already living in a very bad condition, in a very bad room, and now this kid just threw up in the room. And so Miguel snaps out of it, and he pretty much makes Clemson leave the room, and the narrator is very happy that this happened because now he's out of Miguel's pretty much anger scene. Um, and that's how the situation in the room ends. But there's a lot going in. There's a lot that happens within this room in terms of what the narrator is going through in his life. Number one, you can see that he doesn't have control of his life. He's a person that's trying. He's trying to get control of his life. He's trying to direct his life. It seems like his friends had a lot to do with controlling him, his education, school, his parents, all of that kind of pushed his life in several directions, and now he's getting some money in his pockets. He's thinking that, maybe I can do something to make my life better, and then he gets thrown into this room that's dingy, and there's a gun in his face, and so. For him, this is how out of control life can get, or life has gotten, and he just wants that control. Um, and again, this narrator is really we're looking at things through his perspective. We're looking at things through his point of view. Later, what happens is you see, Eduardo told the farmer that if he, because like the men were gathering hay, and they put the hay in the barn, and Eduardo told the farmer that you shouldn't put wet hay into the barn because that could cause a fire, and the farmer didn't listen to Eduardo, and later we learned that the barn did catch fire. And The narrator says he was the one that told the farmer that you know that the barn could catch fire, and that's ridiculous because the narrator didn't do this. So here's our narrator taking credit for something he didn't think of, for something that he didn't say. It was Eduardo, the talker, who warned the farmer. The farmer didn't listen, and the farmer paid for it. Um, the whole thing with Miguel, it's kind of unclear what Miguel is mad about or angry about, because maybe he's mad at the farmer, maybe there's an issue with payment, or maybe the alcohol just brought up everybody he's hated or everybody that's wronged him. Because Miguel doesn't speak perfect English, he speaks very little English. He's in the U.S. He might be undocumented. So that opens up room for people to take advantage of him. That opens up room for people to pay him less, or not pay him what he deserves. And that happens in several different. That happens a lot in the United States when you have people who don't speak the proper English, or they don't understand what's going on. Sometimes people take advantage of them, and these brothers, the way that they're living and the way that the farmer treats them, they've probably worked for several different types of farmers who pay them less and don't pay them enough, and they have to work hard, work backbreaking work to make ends meet. And they're coming from Mexico, and you can see that these men have, the two brothers have done a lot to survive. And so the situation with Miguel, the situation with Eduardo, how I mean, we can even see how the narrator takes advantage of the Mexican brothers here, because Eduardo tells the farmer that if he puts wet hay in the barn, that it could catch fire, and then the narrator takes credit. He tells us like, "Oh, it was me." It was like the narrator, since he's the narrator, he tells us that it was him that told the farmer that. And I mean, it doesn't make sense because he's the one that's the narrator. He's the one that literally told us that Eduardo said it. Now he's taking credit for it. So it's like he's telling on himself that he's a liar. So that's a kind of a weird twist, weird fact within the short story. Um, but there's a lot going on with the narrator, and this short story has to say a lot about life and control, because Eduardo and Miguel, they don't have control of their lives and what happens to them in this foreign country that they're living in and trying to survive in. The narrator doesn't have complete control because his friends and his family, his education, his parents, have a lot to do with his life. And Clemson is just, well, he's just along for the ride and vomiting on people's stuff. Um, so, I mean, in this short story, you kind of see this young man starting to trying to gain independence, trying to being his own individual, trying to make ends meet. But he's learning a lesson that's very valuable, that life, even though you may want it to be better, even though you may want to live a good life, sometimes it's just not up to you. And you may want to be wealthy, have money, make your own decisions, but it's not always that cut and dry. I'm sure that Miguel and Eduardo, they would want to have good lives and fair lives and live perfect lives as well, but because of where they come from, because of their background and the fact that they live in the U.S. or they're surviving in the U.S. and they don't speak good enough English, and that they might now again, the story doesn't come out clearly and say that they don't have any papers, but it kind of seems like it because this is the work that they're doing. They do mention the border and the cops on the border and life on the border between the U.S. and Mexico, the way that they live, the poverty that they live in, and there's another little clue where the narrator enters the room, the little motel room, and the men, Miguel and Eduardo, they have their clothes they have their clothes in suitcases. So it seems like these people are always on the move. They're always going from place to place. So that tells me they don't have a home. So it's not definite, but I kind of feel that kind of tells us that they might not be documented, and they have to keep moving, keep finding work wherever they can find work and just survive. That's not where the narrator is in his life. He's just trying to get parents to be free from. He's just trying to get money. The narrator is just trying to get money to be freed, to have more independence from his parents and friends and school. Clemson, on the other hand, he's working on his family's farm. Um, and I mean, I don't think life is that bad for him. He's just working, and the short story doesn't really go that far into Clemson. He's just a muscular kid, and he's working on this farm that's in the family, and yeah, he's kind of careful, and we know that Clemson is not really that close with poverty because when he walks into that room, when he walks into the motel room where these brothers live, he's uncomfortable. He's really uncomfortable. It kind of seems like he's used um, to more luxurious places, more clean places, places that smell better. But both of these guys, they kind of get a taste of reality for some people, because some people don't have that luxury of having parents they can live off of, or having family members that they can live off of. Miguel and Eduardo, they are at the bottom of the barrel, scraping by, getting seasonal work, living where they can, and it's definite truth that people do take advantage of them, because that's what sends Miguel into that rage, that anger, when he was drinking, because people have taken advantage of him, and it's quite obvious because I mean, if you have a gun, a rusted gun like Miguel has, that means they've run into trouble, and they've had to defend themselves to survive. So the reality of their world is not as easy. It's not a breeze as maybe the narrators or Clemson's. Um, and there's several things that are definite here, but not everything is definite about these individuals' lives. Um, um, with their documentation and the way that they live. But one thing for sure is that all these individuals see life from a different perspective. Miguel and Eduardo, their perspective is we have to do anything that we can to survive, and people are going to take advantage of. People are going to take advantage of us. From the narrator's perspective, I just want to get independence and be free from people telling me what to do. And from Clemson's perspective, you know, um, he pretty much just got into a situation that he didn't want to be in, and well, he was drunk, so um, his vomit saved the day. Yeah. So that's my summary and analysis of this work. That's all I had to say about it. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.